And Jason Chaffetz, always good to have you, sir.
Thank you, thank you.
And Jessica and
fun to be
Lisa.
here. Yeah.
Always love being here.
Busy hour, busy week.
Super fun.
All right, thank you for joining us. And of course, you can join us every weekday at noon Eastern time right here for Outnumbered. And now here's Harris.
Fox News alert, a high-stakes election day that could tell us a lot about the Democrats' prospects in 2018 and the president's clout. Voters heading to the polls in Virginia, where Democrat Ralph Northam is facing off against Republican Ed Gillespie. Today's outcome in increasingly purple state, which has been in the Democratic column the last three presidential elections, could shape how candidates campaign in the next year's midterms and serve as a referendum on President Trump. The president tweeted this: Ed Gillespie will totally turn around the high crime and poor economic performance of Virginia. MS-13 and crime will be gone. Vote today, ASAP. Peter Ducey joins us live from Triangle, Virginia. Peter?
Harris, I caught up with Ed Gillespie in Fairfax County a little bit before it started raining here in the Commonwealth, and I asked the Republican candidate whether or not he is worried about the potential impact of bad weather on Election Day on his chances of becoming governor.
Not really. Our voters are enthusiastic, and I think the intensity is all on our side. People are pumped up out there. I felt it over the past couple days on the trail, but I've been feeling it for some time now, and I think we're going to win this race because I put forward these plans and ideas to get Virginia growing again. People are hungry for that.
The reason experts are so curious to see how Gillespie fares as a Republican in the Trump era is because he never actually invited the president to come campaign with him, even though he lives right across the Potomac River. And Gillespie did represent the Republican establishment as RNC chairman before President Trump shook up the system, but he still promises to work with this president who has endorsed him if he wins. And this campaign model, if it works, could help Republicans in blue states in 2018. Now, as for the Democrat running today, Ralph Northam, he's framing himself now as the only choice for voters who want a diverse Virginia.
You know, most importantly, too, especially a lot of millennials that we talk to, they want to know that we live in an inclusive Virginia, and that's something that we as Democrats, and certainly something that I stand for. I welcome people to the Commonwealth of Virginia. Our doors are going to be open, our lights are on. That's where we're going to move forward.
Polls close 6 hours from right now. Northam has been trekking his way up to the northern Virginia suburbs that are very liberal, right outside Washington, D.C., while Gillespie has been heading south toward the capital city, Richmond, where he hopes he'll be living for the next couple of years. Harris?
Very well put. Thank you very much, Peter Ducey. Joining us from Washington now, the chair of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. Ronna, great to have you on the program today. What is making the difference for Ed Gillespie right now?
Well, Ed's finishing strong. He's putting forward a positive vision for Virginians. He's talking about the economy and tax cuts and growing jobs and wages. And Ralph Northam on the other side has shown that he's flip-flopped on major issues like sanctuary cities, on the statues. He hasn't denounced this terrible ad that was run on behalf of his campaign. He's even flip-flopped on whether or not he'll work with the president. So when you're looking at the leadership comparison, Ed Gillespie's pulling ahead because he's showing that he's a true leader for Virginia.
You know, I'm curious to know about the role of the president of the United States in this race, because wouldn't you say that he put this state in play for Republicans with a 6-point deficit, but still that was slim in the presidential election for the state of Virginia?
Well, the president's been all in with Ed. He's tweeted about it today. He dropped robocalls into the state yesterday, and today he's been pushing his voters to get out and support Ed Gillespie. But at the end of the day, and I was Michigan chair, I think every race comes down to the candidates that are running and the vision they're putting forward. I think voters are less and less concerned about what Washington says or endorsements. They're more concerned about what is Ed Gillespie putting forward and what is Ralph Northam putting forward. And when you look at the two visions that they're putting forward to their state, for their state, Ed Gillespie wins hands down.
Yeah, but it certainly hasn't hurt him to also borrow some of the principles and some of the language from the president in recent days, as you've seen. And you're right. I mean, every race has its kind of own personality, if you will. But the president has played a role in this, again, putting this Democratic state into play in a presidential election. I want to move on to, you talk about your past history in Michigan and those lessons you learned. If you don't win, what are some of the lessons you'll take away from this and say, okay, we're going to apply these next time?
Well, I do look at every race as individual, so I don't look at it as a bellwether for what's happening. At the RNC, though, we've been all in Virginia. We've knocked 3 million doors. I feel very good about our ground game, our voter contacts. We're going to continue to do that in all these battleground states. And with our record fundraising, with the support of President Trump and those small dollar donations that are pouring into the RNC, we're able right now to be in all these battleground states and start setting up our data and our ground game like we've done in Virginia.
Yeah, I hear you alluding to my next question, and that's money, money, money. The DNC, compared with the RNC, is in trouble right now. What kind of an advantage does that give you in terms of their inability to raise funds right now compared with yours?
Well, it's a huge advantage. One is it shows the enthusiasm for the president with his base, that the RNC is doing so well with fundraising, especially with donors under $200. But secondly, and which is so important for me as RNC chair, is now I have the resources to be in states early. I'm already putting state directors in battleground states and data directors. It takes a long time to build a ground game. It takes over 2 years. And so to have that advantage right now going into these midterms, I think it puts us well ahead of the Democrats. And when you have races that are won on the margins, it's going to depend on the ground game. And that's what we're focused on at the RNC.
Talk to me a little bit about intensity, because you always hear people talk about voter intensity. And I don't know if dollars make a sense. Those door knocks do, though, because that's one-on-one contact. And I guess that's not free. You got to spend money to get those door knocks. But what is driving particularly Virginia voters, you've talked about, but Republican voters to the polls? Where is the intensity for them?
Well, across the country, we are seeing a huge intensity among our base for tax reform and tax cuts, things that are going to get our economy going, jobs, wages. We've seen wages stagnate under the Obama economy. We haven't seen growth in our country. So that's something Republicans across the board are looking at. And that's why Ed Gillespie's message is resonating in Virginia, because he's talking about jobs and the economy and growing the Commonwealth of Virginia's economy. So that's something Republicans across the board support. And I will say they support the president. They want to see him get his agenda passed, and they want to see Republicans work with him and Democrats work with him to pass things that are going to help the American people.
Yeah, I see the smile in you in this. I mean, this is a big day, and you've got the money to do what you think you need to do. You know, I want to bring up one state, New Jersey, though, that has been kind of problematic with Chris Christie's approval rating. I mean, in the bottom of the bucket right now. You've got his Lieutenant Governor, Kim Godano, who's going against Phil Murphy in New Jersey. Where do you put that race? I mean, that's a typical place. You saw a difference with Christie, but typically it has been Democrat in the past. And a return to Republican again. What do you think your chances are there?
Well, both of these races today, Virginia and New Jersey, went for Democrats in 2016. We know they went with Hillary Clinton. They're tough races for Republicans. I'll say Kim has run a great race. I think she's created some real differences between her and Phil Murphy in the final days of the race, specifically on his stance to make New Jersey a sanctuary state.
That's very true.
But it's a tough race, and Republicans have a tough time there. But we're hoping for a win there as well. We're going to look at the results tonight, and we hope we come out on top, but New Jersey has been a tougher race than it's been in the past for us.
One of the things, real quickly, before I let you go, that made the difference that we've been able to watch here from New York is the debates. Guadagno seemed to do well against Phil Murphy in the debate. Probably, I would think, her closeness with Chris Christie, because he's one heck of a debater.
Yeah, she's a fighter. She came after Phil Murphy. I think she's created great separation. She's been pushing on the issues, and she and Ed Gillespie have run really strong campaigns in Virginia and New Jersey, and states that Democrats won in 2016. And we're hoping to keep New Jersey Republican and switch Virginia tonight.
Yeah. Well, as you know, on the other side of the aisle with the DNC, there's a little bit of a distraction with a tell-all book that's come out by the former interim chair. So that's playing a role, too, as you go forward in at least the conversations. We appreciate this one. Ronna McDaniel, the chair of the RNC, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's do a Fox News alert now as law enforcement in Texas held a news conference. You watched it here on Fox just moments ago. They gave an update on their investigation into the church shooting in Texas, stressing that they are only 48 hours in on their investigation and are currently working to retrieve information from the suspects phone. They would not say what kind of phone, but they say they haven't gotten into that phone yet. Adam Housley is live for us in Sutherland Springs, Texas. They leaned hard on that, and a lot of reporters had questions about it. Adam?
Yeah, same thing we saw a couple of years ago when the terror attack happened in San Bernardino, and the FBI had troubles getting into that phone as well. They wouldn't tell us what the make and the model of was the phone, but we do know, and we cover technology here at Fox, that the new phones are becoming more and more difficult to access. They made that very clear in the press conference. They also made it very clear, Harris, that Stephen Williford, even though he does not want to be called a hero, he says is a hero. He saved lives nearly just a little more than 48 hours ago in the church behind me. They've taken away one of the portable investigative buildings that have been put up, so you can now get a better look at the church where horror took place. There's flags out front, one of Texas, one of the United States, and one of the church, all flying at half staff inside the investigation and outside. The investigation will go on here, he says, for a number of days. In fact, if you come back out, you can show you how close Stephen Williford lives from that church. He talked. The reports were, of course, that he ran out barefoot after his daughter said she heard gunshots. There is his house right there. It shows you how close he ran to stop that shooter. Unbelievable when you hear his account. Take a listen.
The people at that church, they're friends of mine, their family. And every time I heard a shot, I knew that that probably represented a life. I was scared to death.
Scared to death, but at the same time, he engaged that shooter, and everybody involved in this investigation say that act saved lives. Inside that church, we did hear also that it was a 4-minute time frame from the time the first call went into the sheriff's department here to the time they arrived on scene. We don't know how long it took after the shooting, because we've been told that the shooter actually targeted people who were taking out their phones trying to call authorities. That same Department of Public Safety spokesman had this to say about Stephen Williford.
Mr. Williford, I believe he's a hero. I've seen no media since this started, but somebody sent me a clip of an interview that he did with the media, and how can you not love that guy? You know, that guy did what he knew needed to be done, and but as far as his future plans and what he had planned for the rest of the day, and if there would have been more deaths, you know, it's all speculation.
And as we heard also from that press conference, 4 minutes. That's how long it took the Department of Public Safety, or the Sheriff's Department, I should say, here in Wilson County to arrive. But 4 minutes, even if that was right when the shooting began, is an eternity when you have an active shooter. Harris?
Yeah, we did hear him say that, but the detail that you've just given is important too, because it wouldn't have been just right after the shooting began, because if this monster was shooting people with their phones in their hands, there may have been some delay there, as you can imagine. Victim Services also came to the lectern. We were watching that on Outnumbered, Adam. And I just want to ask you about this idea, this fund that they've set up, because they're going to be donating the cost of all of the coffins for the deceased. That was a particularly emotional moment.
Yeah, it kind of put things into perspective. Obviously, here on the ground, Harris, the perspective is very clear. For our viewers, obviously, heartbreaking, sickening when you hear the details. But when you hear that detail, I mean, you had a family lose 8 members. The guy down the street who I just talked to, who's battling cancer himself, who's lived in this town for 20 years, he knew 7 victims, including 2 kids that mowed his front lawn. I mean, so these people, I mean, they've lost a lot, and you don't want them to have any burden whatsoever, including those that are still in the hospital or those who've been injured. And that was made very clear in the press conference. I'll make sure that FoxNews.com has the link as well to raise money. We know the local funeral homes also are being very cooperative to help with ensure that these families don't have to pay a dime.
Yeah, you and I are connected on social media. We'll work to get that out together today as well,
Absolutely.
Adam, to give it some extra push.
We'll do that.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Last July, then FBI Director James Comey called Hillary Clinton, quote, extremely careless in the handling of classified information that was on her email server, a private one. But the words Comey originally used were harsher. Those words got changed. Why? Also, the president in South Korea today responding to a question about holding direct talks with Kim Jong-un of the North. Republican Congressman Joe Wilson of the House Armed Services Committee weighs in on that. He is my guest this hour. You're watching Outnumbered Overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner.
We like to play our cards a little bit close to the vest. I will say this, that I believe it makes sense for North Korea to do the right thing. not only for North Korea, but for humanity all over the world.
President Trump is in South Korea, where he is expected to give a big speech on North Korea tonight. It will be at a joint news conference earlier that he said North Korea is a worldwide threat that requires worldwide action, and that China's been helpful, and he hopes Russia will be as well. Meanwhile, here's what he said when asked whether he thinks diplomacy with North Korea is working.
I think we're making a lot of progress. I think we're showing great strength. I think they understand we have unparalleled strength. There has never been strength like it. We have many things happening that we hope, in fact, I'll go a step further. We hope to God we never have to use. With that being said, I really believe that it makes sense for North Korea to come to the table and to make a deal that's good for the people of North Korea and the people of the world. I do see certain movement, yes, but let's see what happens.
My next guest is Congressman Joe Wilson of South Carolina. He is the chairman of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities. We're glad he's along this hour. Thank you, sir, for being with us. What is the progress that the president is talking about with regard to North Korea?
Well, Harris, I appreciate your insight. And indeed, just this week, the president has increased the funding for missile defense, also ship repair to $5.9 billion more. This has been accepted by the chairman of the conference committee, Mac Thornberry. This is a huge step. And then we see success in Japan. Prime Minister Abe has announced new sanctions against North Korea. So the president is being successful with peace through strength.
You know, the president, though, had a tougher tone with China than what we're seeing now. And I'm wondering why the difference and what that accomplishes.
Well, he's a negotiator, and the end result is that he wants to make sure that there's not a nuclear threat by North Korea against the people of Korea, Japan, and American families. And of course, Kim Jong-un has threatened to not only strike the West Coast, but the East Coast of the United States, and also our wonderful territory of Guam. So I'm really proud of the president. I think he's making tremendous success, and I know that his visit in South Korea, I was there just last month. The troops there couldn't wait to see him. He knows that he has their back.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting. I mentioned on our last hour about Outnumbered, the visual. In the middle of the night, I saw it when he was with Moon, and they were with both the South Korean and American troops. And there's a point where they're breaking bread together before he speaks. You look like you have a thought on that. I want you to let us know.
Well, I do. The American people need to know how important Camp Humphreys is. It's actually being paid for by Korean taxpayers, but it's where tens of thousands of American military personnel will be relocated from downtown Seoul to a world-class military facility. And that's how we maintain peace through strength. And Camp Humphreys that I toured just last month, again, it's an inspiration to see the people of America and South Korea working together.
Yeah, thank you for that added detail on Camp Humphreys. Appreciate that. The president has a big speech tonight. What do you anticipate you'll hear, and what would you like to hear from him?
Well, I was also at the National Assembly last month, and they are so supportive, again, and appreciative that their freedoms have been guaranteed by the people of the United States. They converted one of the poorest countries on earth into one of the richest countries on earth, and so I know it will be a message of peace through strength.
Tell me about Kim Jong-un. I mean, this is a person who has threatened, and we might still see it this trip, we don't know. I mean, he was making just a few days ago threats for more missile launches. How does the president deal with him? And should they sit down, what would you think that would look like?
Well, I'm not sure they're going to sit down, but I know that the dictator is offended by people not showing him proper homage. And if there's ever been a president who has not shown him proper homage, it would be Donald Trump, to call him Rocket Man. And so some people would consider that offensive. No, we're getting the attention of the dictator that America is serious. We want to defend the American people and families, and we want to defend our allies in Korea, Japan, and Guam.
Are you really confident? And I say really because, you know, they didn't even come to the UN General Assembly here. China and Russia will step up and do what they need to do. Could we actually see it?
I believe that the president has a good relationship, very warm, with the president of China, and so I'm hopeful that this can come to fruition. It's in China's interest not to have the level of instability, not to have a nuclearized North Korea, the threat to the whole region, including the Russian Federation. And so with the president there, I am confident that he's going to make that point, that there should be a denuclearized Korean peninsula.
A warm relationship is how you described it with Xi Jinping of China. The president will meet with him still, and we'll follow the news there with those notes from you and in the back of our minds. We appreciate it. Congressman Wilson, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your insight, Harris. It's so positive.
Thank you. And later, don't miss Fox's own Bret Baier in South Korea, traveling with the president on his trip. Earlier today, Bret was at the DMZ.
That sound you hear is Korean pop music being blasted into North Korea. North Korea just 20 yards over my shoulder here. They're countering the North Korean propaganda that's being blasted this way. Tonight at 6 on Special Report, we'll take you inside the DMZ and talk about all the issues around North Korea. 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
My first social media today was pictures of Bret Baier and the DMZ. If you follow him, you know what I mean. Set your clock also for Bret tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern, live from Seoul. Don't miss it right here on Fox News Channel. Well, we are just getting word Attorney General Jeff Sessions will indeed head back to Capitol Hill next week for a routine hearing, we're told. Democrats are already putting him on notice that his past comments about Russia are fair game. Will they be part of that conversation? Should he be concerned? And what would it take for some Democrats to support the tax reform plan? We hear that there's some who are looking at it, and we will look at the possibilities as Republicans try to unite behind the biggest change in the tax code in 30 years. Stay close.
Every American will be better off under this plan. You've got to look at your own unique situation. But what Joint Committee confirmed yesterday is yes, the design of this, because it isn't just about the rates, it's about cutting taxes underneath those rates as well. People are better off.
Fox News Alert now. We are learning Attorney General Jeff Sessions will testify before the House Judiciary Committee next Tuesday. We're told it's part of a routine Justice Department oversight hearing, but it does come just days after Senate Democrats demanded Sessions return to Capitol Hill to clarify his statements on Russia. Democrats on the House panel not wasting any time after the announcement, issuing a press release with the title that they're putting Sessions, quote, on notice, saying they want answers after new documents revealed that a former Trump campaign advisor pushed to set up a meeting between then-candidate Donald Trump and Russia President Vladimir Putin. Also likely to come up, former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page told a House panel last week that he had informed Sessions of a trip to Russia in July of last year, but Sessions had denied misleading lawmakers that he didn't know if members of the campaign had met with Russians. Joining us now, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, a member of the House Judiciary Committee. So this is a routine situation. Yep. I want to know what you anticipate next Tuesday.
Well, I know what I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him why he hasn't appointed a special counsel to look into Clinton, Comey, Lynch, Fusion GPS, the dossier, all this stuff, the news that's broke the last couple weeks. We sent Attorney General Sessions a letter. 20 House Republican members of the Judiciary Committee sent him a letter on July 27th asking him to name a special counsel to look into those very issues. 2 months later, we met with him. 5 of us met with him at his office, asking the same thing, and yet we've not heard an answer or a response from the Justice Department about that special counsel appointment, which we think should happen. And frankly, I think the American people think should happen. So I'm gonna focus on that issue. Mm-hmm. I think, and you'll see a lot of Republicans do that, I believe.
Well, and you've also seen the president do that. He has said that he wanted to see that happen as well.
Well, Clinton, I mean, Harris, the Clinton campaign, the DNC paid for the dossier. Maybe the FBI was reimbursing Christopher Steele, as some people have pointed out. That raises lots of questions. Really? Was the dossier then relied on to put surveillance on certain people associated with the Trump campaign by the FISA court? Why? There's a host of questions you can go through that just point to, let's name a special counsel, let's get to the bottom bottom of this. Let's get answers to the American people. And it hasn't happened yet, so we're going to ask him about it.
All right. I would just add this one thing before we move on from this issue, though, and it is always a criticism coming back. Did Republicans play a role in purchasing any material as well through the same Fusion GPS? And your response would be?
Not to the dossier. It's been clear that while the Free Beacon reported that Republicans paid for hired GPS to do some opposition research, the dossier was paid for by the Clinton team, by the Democrat National Committee through that law firm, and potentially paid for by the FBI, as some have reported. So I think that's a critical question. We need to get to the bottom of that.
All right. What else do you expect to come up next Tuesday? I mentioned that Democrats, of course, are thirsty to ask about the Russia situation. There's several Russia investigations going on, and they want another go at Sessions, if you will. What are your thoughts about that?
No, of course they're going to ask about that, but here's what we know. To date, not one piece of evidence that Donald Trump and his campaign colluded with the Russians and tried to influence the election. Not one piece of evidence. But we got all kinds of evidence that the Obama Justice Department tried to influence the election last year. We got all kinds of evidence that the Clinton campaign, the DNC, paid for the dossier that may have been the catalyst or may have been the basis for the wiretap or the surveillance that was put on certain folks associated with the Trump campaign. So I think it'll be an interesting hearing. It's the time for the Attorney General to come and answer questions like he does every year. And I think he's going to get a lot of tough questions.
All right, let's move on. I want to talk about tax reform. I understand we have a markup in our future, in our very new future. You smile. What are things looking like with the tax plan right now?
Well, we'll see what comes out of committee. Overall, we conservatives said all along, will it actually cut taxes? Will it simplify the code? And will it be conducive to producing economic growth? If the answer to those three questions are a yes, then I think you're going to see members go for it. I think what we have right now in the outline of the bill, what's being talked about, what was introduced earlier in the week, I think it moves in that direction. So I think it's overall pretty good. There are some things that need to be changed, though. Look, there's concerns about the pass-throughs, the small business, and the rate and how that rate is determined. There's concern about the adoption tax credit, for example. So there's lots of things being talked about. One of the things I think is important is I would love to see the repeal of the individual mandate as part of this legislation, the individual mandate on Obamacare.
It's not in there right now.
It's not in there right now, but this is something we campaigned on. This is something we told the American people we were going to do, something we've all voted for.
Yeah.
And maybe most importantly in this context, the way CBO scores this, it actually frees up a lot of money that you could do further tax cuts for American families. So I hope that gets added and something we conservatives are going to push for.
I'm reading about that. A lot of people talking about it. You know, I was so excited to talk to you today because I want to ask this question of people, and you're actually somebody who can talk to me about it. So why hasn't there been more focus on your specialty, and that is spending cuts? That's something that the president talked about very early on, that you don't just find it within the system already, the money to pay for tax cuts and tax reform on the backs of some, if that's even necessary. You find it through spending cuts. What's going on?
No, I agree with you completely, Harris. This idea of revenue neutrality, which is a fancy way, a Washington way of saying the burden stays the same, you just shift around who pays what. That is not how we should be doing. As one of my colleagues, Thomas Massey, says, you don't pay for tax cuts, you pay for spending.
So are you looking for them?
I've been looking for spending. I voted against the big spending bill just a few weeks ago. They gave $36 billion because it didn't have offsets. So I'm looking for ways that we can cut spending. We can introduce the right kind of budgets, do the right kind of thing on the spending side. But on the tax side, let's just put together a tax code that is conducive to growth, that actually cuts taxes and simplifies our cumbersome code. That should be the focus. Can't you do both? Yes, you can, but right now we're focused on the tax portion of the bill, the tax legislation of the bill. I'm for cutting spending, and we're for doing that too.
I just know how hard you've worked on this, and I wonder if anybody's really listening to you on the fact that, you know, the American people would like to not see any more of the, and you know the optic of this, whether it's always true or not, that the little hamster on the wheel and that we're paying for some sort of science project for him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's somewhat of a cliche and a joke, but it's true that there is money there to be found and to save.
Yeah, I think the best place to look, and this is something we've been pushing, we've introduced legislation, is to look for welfare reform. Because welfare reform, we will actually save money for the taxpayers, but more importantly, we will help families who are now dependent on the government get to a better position in life, get to a better station in life. Let's work on that. And oh, by the way, many of our employers need employees. It's a labor issue as well. So let's work on welfare reform, reforming those entitlements, because that's good for everybody. We have legislation that would require a work component for people who get a benefit before they can get that benefit. When you do that, when you put in place a work requirement, you get less people signing up for the benefit. They just go get a job or just go get another job or a better job. That's the kind of reform we need that will save money and help our economy.
All right. The Senate's waiting for you guys to get this done. The president says by Thanksgiving. Yes or no?
I do. I think we'll get it done next week. It'll pass the House, and then it's off to the Senate, and we'll see what happens over there.
Representative Jim Jordan, very positive on getting tax reform. Appreciate you taking all my questions, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Harris.
They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but could 2 words mean the difference between committing a crime or not? We'll tell you what that has to do with former FBI Director James Comey and Hillary Clinton when the Power Panel joins us next.
Although we did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information.
That was James Comey last year when he announced that Hillary Clinton would not be facing charges over her private email server, though he found her to be, quote, extremely careless. But it turns out those were not the original words from the former FBI director. In an earlier draft just revealed by Senate Judiciary Chair Chuck Grassley, Comey actually wrote that Clinton was, quote, grossly negligent. That difference is key, since federal law states that gross negligence in the handling of the nation's intelligence can be punished criminally with prison time or fines. And it's outnumbered overtime. So back from the outnumbered couch, Democratic strategist Jessica Tarlov and the former Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, Jason Chaffetz. I'm actually going to talk with you first, Congressman, because oversight. This is
my wheelhouse.
Yeah, this is it. So what are your thoughts?
It's outrageous that the director was starting to draft his conclusion before something like 16 or 17 people had yet to be interviewed. They hadn't interviewed Hillary Clinton herself. If a judge had started to write his decision before he heard all the testimony, we'd be outraged. And that's just fundamentally and totally wrong.
So the people hear that you're outraged, but they just want to know what's going to happen.
The frustration for America is that Lady Justice seems to kind of peek with her, take her little blindfold down when it's got Clinton involved and say, oh, well, we can't do that because it's a Clinton. Because anybody else that it happened to, they'd be going to jail for these kind of things that happened during that email fiasco. You can't traverse in classified information in a non-classified setting. There are people that have gone to jail for that previously, and they should.
No, it's true. And that's the best visual of the day with the lady pulling scales of justice. Look, I haven't heard you much, Jessica, defend Hillary Clinton on this. And I'm
on this, I mean, the private email server was a tremendous mistake. I think it was one of the key contributors to her losing the election, the ensuing coverage of it. But yeah, and if you read her book, actually, she talks about this explicitly. I think it's terrible. I have no problem, actually, with Chuck Grassley looking into this and Senator Grammer leading the way on it. I'm not calling for a special prosecutor. I know that you have done that. I just think that everything should be fair here. I think what President Trump was doing last week on Twitter, calling out the DOJ, right, saying that you should be going after my political opponent, is a complete abuse of the system. Republicans and Democrats agree on that. I just think that things should be fair. Jim Comey ended up messing with both parties here, right? This is Democrats.
I was going to say you don't like him, so.
No,
but that's why there should be a special prosecutor.
I am not a lawyer. I don't know if it's what a special prosecutor is needed for. I imagine that Republicans are certainly going to continue to push that argument, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, the problem though is, and I'm glad the Attorney General is going before the Judiciary Committee in the House. It's his first appearance since he's become the Attorney General. But a lot of people are going to ask questions about, did you recuse yourself? And if you did recuse yourself, why can't there be a special prosecutor? Because everything from Uranium One all the way through to Comey's actions,
but
you do have the Inspector
on the
General
other side of it, though, there are a lot of people who have worked in the DOJ and around issues like this who do say that this is completely normal procedure, that you would have a draft memo that then got updated. And it's not only Jim Comey who could have made that change. There are apparently 3 people that could have. So listen, when he stood up there—
After you interview all the witnesses, but you're doing it before you've interviewed the witnesses?
It doesn't. It's certainly not how I do my homework. But I'm just saying, it's been a while since I did homework, but.
So the former FBI director's bar doesn't mean Jessica Tarlov, since she's not an attorney.
I'm very into my schoolwork,
right?
But no, I am not an attorney, so I don't know about the special prosecutor
he
in
testified,
this.
John Radcliffe in the House Judiciary Committee, a very serious prosecutor, a former U.S. attorney from Dallas. He asked on point exactly Director Comey, when did you make this decision? And he said it was only after But she was interviewed on Saturday of the 4th of July weekend, and he showed up Tuesday morning.
What about the fact that people say that these memos do get written ahead of time, which Andrew Napolitano has acknowledged as well?
Right, and what Judge Naps has said on this show, Napolitano, I call him Judge Naps affectionately, what he has said on this show is that it normally wouldn't be before you would interview all of these principals in it. It normally wouldn't be, but if it were ever to be written, his point is it's not a yes this way or a yes this way. It's kind of all
like the framework.
Yeah, the framework of how you would lay out whatever you're going to say. You don't have the answer yet. I want to get back to the words, though, gross negligence. That's a very different. If this, with the Oversight Committee, when you look at the change in the lingo that was used, that seems to be kind of a theme. I mean, we had a Attorney General that was going to call things a matter instead of an investigation into Hillary Clinton and her email server. What are your thoughts?
It does seem to be toned down, and I think the number one question they're going to ask is, what precipitated the change? Like, why did you actually, if it was down there and you changed it, why did you change it? And then the other thing he will continue to be questioned on is this whole idea of intent, because the statute doesn't say there has to be intent. It's just gross negligence.
Absolutely. I mean, gross negligence 100% sounds worse than extreme carelessness, but he basically stood up there and indicted her without indicting her anyway.
I mean, let's go. We're going to scoot, but you're going to stay. A year ago tomorrow, President Trump made history with his victory over Hillary Clinton. So how would you rate the job he's doing? The power panel stays right here.